Awesome. We are now recording. We're tackling the factorial challenge. We need to write a function. It takes a number as an argument, and then we need to print out its factorial. And just to remind folks, like the factorial of 4 is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. The factorial of 5 is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So I'm thinking we need a loop, and we need to decrement that loop down to 1 and then stop, because we don't want to multiply by 0, because then we don't end up with anything. But we want to do like num times num minus 1. I don't know if there's probably a better way to do this recursively. My first thought, Zainab, is we could have we could create a variable and we could call it like the product. And then we could use a loop to go through the numbers that we need and multiply the product by each one. So maybe let's create a variable named product and just not set it to anything yet.
Okay.
Or actually, maybe we should set it to,
to 1, because anything multiplied by 1 is the same.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Totally.
Okay.
And then I'm thinking a for loop where we iterate from num and we decrement it each time until we get to 0.
Okay.
I guess this is not the recursive approach. My brain is freezing on the recursive approach, to be honest.
Check Slack. But yes, so we're
thank you.
going from num. I actually haven't written a for loop in JavaScript in a while. Can the students help me? So how do I?
Need a semicolon.
Let x equals 1, x does not equals num.
I is less than or greater than or.
Okay, I is less than or equal to 1.
Semicolon.
And then
increment
I plus plus.
Or I, yeah.
We're decrementing, he said, so the I should be greater than 0.
I minus
I minus minus.
Minus. Okay. So what's the difference between me putting I greater than or equal to 1 or I greater than 0?
Nothing, they're the same.
Okay. Yep.
As long as you're dealing with integers, it's the same.
Yep. Just wanted to show
That's
that.
a good point.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
I have a minor preference for greater than 0, but I don't really care.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Okay. Greater than 0.
Thank you. That, folks, by the way, that's a great example of something not to make a big deal about when pairing. Like, that's not worth arguing over if people have strong feelings about it. And so we've got the loop, and I'm thinking we can do, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I can just console log num or I just to start off with something, just iteratively building it up.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, typically when we're developing things, you want to keep testing things out and seeing what outputs you have. But yeah, so after this, what do we do?
Yeah, and in fact, should we just run the spec file, even though the test still failed, just to watch our console log?
Yes, it's called factorial spec. Okay, so now we have, well, we're gonna get a lot of numbers, but yeah, it's doing what we want it to. So Goes from
Oh,
8
yeah.
down to 1, and then it says false. And the spec, it is testing 8. So great.
Awesome. Why don't we comment out the 2 big tests in the spec file?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Also, to comment out things, it's command / or control / in VS Code. Okay.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and folks, it's super, like, never be afraid to like mess around with code and comment stuff out like that. I know, especially when you're new to certain things, it can be a little unclear what's okay to comment out. The more you do this, the more comfortable you'll get with it. So now our life is easier when we run the test file right now. So we've got the console log statement, which is awesome. And I was just thinking we can just do like product equals product times I. And I think that should give us 5. 1 times 5. That was a great idea to set product equal to 1. And then the next time around, it would give us 5 times 4 and so on and so on.
Okay. So do we want to, I mean, we can test it out and we have to return the product, right?
We do. And then we also want to decrement. Oh, we don't have to decrement it, of course, because the loop does it. Sorry.
So I'm just gonna put the chat up here.
Yeah, that's a good call. And let's see how this works.
We're getting true.
Cool. Awesome.
So if we uncomment these 2 out. Also, I'm gonna comment this one out so we don't get a lot of noise in the terminal.
That's a great idea.
Okay. So we're getting what the students were getting, which was true, true, and then for the last one was false. So let's do.
What was going on again here again with the false?
Yeah, so let's do 1 sec. I'm just gonna print out product before it returns.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I will share with the class for pairing. I think this is partially an answer to your question, Jib. Zoom communication is tough. So what I found is just honestly a lot of chit chat while coding, just to kind of help check in with each other helps a lot. As silly as it sounds, because it's pretty small, I think it helps with, especially doing this over Zoom. Originally, the idea with pair programming was it was 2 people in person, you know, sitting at a screen together, but the pandemic kind of changed all that.
Michael?
Where I found out it was messing up is if you console log like you did there, but if you console log also in factorial spec and just take that number and console log it, it gives you 2 different numbers.
So if I do.
Just the number we're checking it against is what I was talking about. Sorry.
Oh, this one. Okay, okay. So you just want me to console log this?
Yep.
Okay. And I'm also gonna.
Cool.
Okay. So
Massive number.
yeah, this one is different. So this is this number, right? I should have put whatever, something.
Yes, that's correct. 19 is that number.
Yeah. Okay.
It's. Oh yeah.
Now,
Okay.
now it's adding it because it's appending it, but I understand. Okay.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know off the top of my head how many degrees of precision are relevant here.
Mhm.
It looks like, oh, it's the O2 versus the 1.9.
Yeah, I think
this
it's
is
like rounding or something like that. It's just like rounding
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
yeah.
I saw
Um,
earlier in when I was looking it up, it was like the 19th position JavaScript starts rounding after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we saying that this number is wrong?
I
No,
think
but
they're both. I think they're both right. I think we just have to pick the one that we want to use. I remember
it's funny because if I print out the results coming in, that's the one. So this is coming from here. Or is it not? Because I'm printing out the product, which should be this.
Yes, the 19 comes from the spec folder or file.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe the spec file needs to be updated. Okay. Well, what if
Yeah.
I heard someone say that if we cast it, then it goes away, right? Or yes, no?
yeah.
You
I
cast it,
remember-
yeah, cast as a big int.
Cast the result as a big int?
Yeah, like when you're returning.
That's just gonna change all the scientific notation to zeros. If you want the big int to be as accurate as possible, you're gonna have to do it from the start of the function.
Right, yeah, you have to cast everything as a big int.
Okay.
And actually, you have to cast everything as a big int and then recast it as an integer because big ints have an n at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What does this, I've heard people use the word cast regularly. What does the word cast mean?
Cast is pretty much when you have like one variable with one data type and you want to transform it into a different data type. So I'm not sure if this is I think it's just integer, or is it I integer, like capital I? I don't know. I forget some of the syntax, but let's say we want to cast this as an integer.
Is
should-
cast an official, because I know that in SQL, they use the word cast.
Mhm.
Is it akin to that, or is it a process, or is it a function inside of JavaScript?
No, casting is just a term, like it's a process of doing something. It's the process of casting the character 2 or like the string 2 into an integer. So it's kind of like wrapping it into a way that it needs to be.
Yeah,
It's
SQL
basically
very well
changing the
may
data
have-
type.
Sorry.
Isn't it like changing the data type from string to integer?
Yeah, exactly. SQL probably does have some sort of function to cast from one type another. Casting is one of those concepts that's the term is I think pretty universally used across computer science, and so you see it just pop up in all sorts of places.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Could we-
I've been doing a little. What's in it?
Sorry, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say I've been doing a little Googling to try and find if there's what a clean solution to our casting big int problem is.
Mhm. So apparently doing it recursively solves that. So we can do a
Interesting.
recursive way of doing this.
Yeah. I would vote for that,
Yeah,
to
it
be
does.
honest.
Want to see recursion? First of all, who can tell me what recursion is? You guys probably might have come across it, but not sure.
Recursion is when a function calls itself.
Yep. It's pretty much instead of doing like a lot of loops, or just a loop that loops around, you can have a function call itself, and it simplifies the code. And I think it's is it better for runtime, Adam? Or depends, I guess, how it's written.
I heard it wasn't, right?
Not-
It was like
Terrible
Not
for
necessarily.
runtime.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
depends on the situation.
yeah.
I thought you're making a brand new function every time you call it, so you have to use more
keeps it on the
space and memory.
Exactly, and it keeps it on the stack if it's more. But I think it might be faster in some situation. I'm not sure exactly, but I know it has some certain application.
Yeah, it does. It would, yeah, I don't know exactly either. It would depend on the problem specifics. Like with recursion, in some ways you kind of clean up as you go. So there could be certain kinds of problems where doing recursion is more efficient because you don't have to like store 1,000 pointers or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
So-
and folks, I kind of definitely it's good to learn how to deal with these issues that we see with like this very, very big number. They can come up sometimes. Like if you ever do work with like currency and money, then you start to really care about this stuff. We won't see tons of it. And so like Zainab and I are now, we're kind of like, well, we've basically solved this problem. Like in some technical interviews, at this point, the interviewer would probably be like, yeah, you basically got it. I know you can figure the rest out. Sometimes they might really want to see you work it out. But it's not uncommon in programming to be at a certain point, like, okay, we see the problem, we know how to fix it. We basically have the big picture solution right. So we're kind of deciding, all right, we don't want to deal with that right now. We're just going to move on. And I think solving this recursively also is a great idea, Zainab. Do you want to keep driving or do you want to switch?
I can keep driving. I don't mind.
Okay, cool. Let's
Actually, if you want to switch, do you want to take control? Or I think I can give you.
Sure. Yeah, I figured it'd be cool. We can just kind of switch the dynamic up for pairing purposes.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for giving me, for
Is
setting that up.
is there etiquette or rules for switching like this?
That is a great question. Honestly, no. For our class, I would say we want a pretty good balance. So that's a really good question. So the one bit of etiquette when you're pairing, especially in person, is that the navigator should not be touching the keyboard. Only one person should be touching the keyboard. Remotely, that's a little fuzzier, obviously. I guess what I would say is the navigator should probably try to avoid like giving direct commands about how to write out each line of code, unless the driver is saying like, hey, I could use a hand here, or it's a bit of a back and forth. So I would say when we're pairing remotely, I think the etiquette is like, Zainab and I, we mixed it up a bit, but generally speaking, like she was figuring out like writing the for loop and the pieces. And I was kind of like, I think we should solve this with a for loop. And that was our division of labor. I would, and that's sort of, I would say, what you want to try to adhere to when we're pairing remotely. I think the main piece of etiquette with switching is to make sure that it happens and so that it's shared. You don't want to switch like every 5-10 minutes. That would be frustrating. Each group is probably going to have its own rhythm, but if you're pairing with someone for the 2 to 4 hours of an afternoon, I would imagine that you would switch at least once.
It strikes me there should be some early agreement on pseudocode that you can change it later, but it strikes me that you have to have an approach you each agree on.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would say that that's a conversation to be had in the beginning as you start to work on the problem. And if you want to be writing out pseudocode when doing that, then that's awesome. I don't pseudocode all the time, though I do a good amount. Some people hate it. Some people really like it. I do think it's underutilized and really useful. Pairing is gonna end up being pretty collaborative, and honestly, it also is gonna end up being pretty case dependent. It really, a lot of it does come down to personality. So I think the main thing is to be checking in with each other to make sure that you both feel good about how the pairing session is doing, and adjusting if you need to. Especially because this is something that's relatively new for all of us, and we're all kind of learning it. Generally, I think once people do it a couple times, you kind of get a feel for it. But yeah, Jim, I agree. I do agree. You do want to talk about the problem and kind of come up with an approach that both of you feel good about.
Are you able to access my screen or control it? I think you have to accept.
Should I hit my own share screen button?
No, I sent you, like, you're able to control. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, hold on one moment. Oh, I am.
Yeah. You don't have to close that. Okay, there we go.
Oh, thank you
so
much. Okay, I didn't realize that was going on. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zainab.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm thinking for this is that we can comment this code out, or we can just, I guess we can comment it out, yeah.
Sounds good.
And then if you could create the same like exports factorial equals function. Okay. So let's see. So I want to make this a recursive function. I'm not sure how I would be able to call this factorial function. So let's create a helper function. So we can just do function. Could we actually show the arrow function syntax? Yeah, just so
totally
they see it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So our helper function is going to take in a number, and then inside we're going to check if, actually we won't check anything. So let's return num times helper and you send in num -1.
Yep, got it.
So
yep,
pretty much what I want to do is I want to take the current number, and then I want to multiply it with whatever comes out of this function, and I'm going to send in number -1. And so the way, how can I, so pretty much the first helper will have, so if it's a factorial of 4, helper of 4 is called, and then still in that it's going to be 4 times helper of 3. Helper of 3 is called, it's going to be 3 times helper of 2, and so on until it gets to 1. And we want to stop at 1, so we're going to add a condition up here to say if number equals 1, then we are going to return 1.
Do we want to return? Do we want to return 1?
We can return 1 or num, but because 1 equals num.
Of course.
So it's going to be the same.
Yeah, of course. I got confused. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we need the else clause so that, oh, actually we don't need,
Yeah, so the return will end up in the else clause. We don't really need the else clause if we don't want to, but we can put it in there. But yeah, this should work. So pretty much what we're expecting, if we put helper at 2, for it to be return 2 times helper at 1, it hits the base case, and then when this one returns, it's going to be 1 times 2, and that's what it's going to return. Every time it's gonna kind of go up. If you wanted to type it out, Adam, and yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure how perfect I'm going to be able to get it, but so like help, I'm not sure what the best way to write this out is.
Let me try.
I don't understand why you're using a subordinate function under.
It's because this factorial one, I tried calling it from itself. You can't call it from itself. I don't know how, because it's within like exports dot factorial.
I used this dot factorial based on someone else's, I think it was Dustin's.
I guess that this, yeah.
Oh,
We can just do that. Then you can just remove the helper piece. So remove
gotcha.
line.
Oh, I see. So, right. So this.
Dot factorial. Yeah.
Yeah, because, yeah, that's. Yeah. This context in JavaScript is a little funny. And it's working here because what this context refers to, I believe, is like the scope surrounding our function.
I actually ended up just replacing, and I also tried exports dot factorial also.
Yeah,
So that worked for me.
Oh, exports dot factorial did?
Yes.
Interesting.
It didn't work earlier.
So I just returned exports dot factorial and then num minus 1 times num.
I wonder if that works because the exports object is already defined. Should we run this to just make sure that this code is executing?
Line 9, you need to delete it.
Line, oh,
9,
thank you.
closing print, yeah.
Yeah, and let me fix the indentation for the rest of it. There we go. Node factorial spec. So that's cool. Yeah, that actually works. That actually works great. So this is, yeah, so we're using this context to access the factorial function.
Can you change it to add exports to see if it works?
Yeah, let's give it a shot. Let me save. Can I save?
Oh, it's already saved. I have autosave on.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I should turn autosave on. That is a great call.
I only turn it off when we're doing React projects and stuff like that, when there's a server running.
Got it. Yeah, that works too. Interesting. Yeah. I think the exports object already exists somehow, and that might be, yeah. I think that's what's going on. That's cool. Thank you, Jim.
Autosave is not a plugin. If you go to, yeah, file and then autosave under share.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
No need
So
to
that
write
turns it
down.
off and then it,
Yeah, that's actually a great feature.
I really like it.
Yeah, that's a
What
good
is
call,
auto
Danielle.
save and how does it work then? How does auto save work?
It just, whenever you type anything, it auto saves your files, so you don't have to keep saving.
Does it
Yeah.
diminish your control Z or control Y, whatever your undo function?
No,
it doesn't.
shouldn't. No, it just, you can use it to go back.
yeah, that's a good question, Jim. It should not. It probably tracks file, watches the file for changes on some sort of timer. Though actually, because it's built into the editor, it might even be more granular, but I don't know how exactly it interacts with the undo behavior, but it should work. They should work together just fine. Yeah, Zainab, go for it. I was struggling a little there on how to write that out exactly.
So factorial 4 gets called. And so, oops. This will then want to return, so factorial 4 number is not equal to 1 because it's 4. It goes into the return method here. So it's going to be 4 times factorial 3. And so this down here is going to be factorial 3.
Nice.
Which is 3, and then it calls factorial 2. And then
Nice.
same thing. So just gonna copy this one, 'cause
So
this one-
It's a mathematics law that factorial 0 is 1. Can you go to the factorial spec and add 0?
yeah, we forgot to add that that base case or that case.
I added an OR into
Yeah.
the first what you said, factorial 1 equals 1.
So 0 is 1.
That's a good call. Thank you.
Okay, so let me just finish this example. So 2 factorial of 1, and then I don't think this is gonna, oops. So factorial of 1 then returns 1. And when this returns 1, this 1 replaces this. So it becomes 2 times 1. And then 2 times 1 is 2, which is what this is returning. 2 will replace this. It will be 3 times 2, which is 6. Same here, 6 times 4 is 24. So our final answer will be 24. Any questions on recursion? Or on, just anything with this?
Should I add the exception that Jim mentioned for 0?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Can you
Jim,
run it without
thank
it
you.
first and see what it shows?
Sure. We should
show
get a
false.
failure.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Maximum
maximum.
call stack.
I wonder if that's because, so I think that was our very first call. Yeah, because it's the first test. I think that because we're not handling the 0 case,
Yes.
it jumps right to the recursion and then starts
It's from
subtracting
0 to
into
1,
the
right?
negative numbers and goes on forever.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting. That's, yeah, it's food for thought about how to write the program so that it wouldn't do that. Like if we had an else clause, then it wouldn't, but there's trade-offs there. That's really, sorry, I'm nerding out a little on that. I find that really interesting.
So you could just change your line 4 to if num is equal to 1 or num is equal to 0, return 1.
That is a great call. Yes, and Jim, is that correct? That factorial of 0 is 1?
Yep.
Yep, that works. Part of me wants to make those separate if statements, even though that's silly, just to because they're for different cases, but that actually totally works.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's taste. To be honest, this makes sense for this problem because it is the most efficient way to write this. For a different kind of program, it's not uncommon where maybe as we work on this code over time, we have to add more stuff into that if clause. So having like one if statement to handle the base case of your recursion and one if statement to handle what's essentially like an edge case, which is when we're searching for a factorial of 0, kind of provides a clean separation. So you could like modify each of those independently without screwing up that code and keeping the logic clear. But to be honest, I think I fell into the trap of there's a saying, oh no, it's escaping me.
What happens if you strike the num equals 1 section of that? Because I just added it because I know it's a law. What if you strike the num equals 1? Before that, we only have num equals 0.
So what will happen is it'll go into factorial of 1 minus 1
times
is
1.
0,
Oh,
which
that's
will
what it is then.
return
Yep.
1, I guess. Yeah, it would return 1.
There you go. Well, yeah. So it'll jump out right away when it equals 0.
Yeah, I guess.
Because 1 minus 0 or 1 minus 1 is 0.
Yeah, and then it'll just stop at the 0.
So can you strike the num equals 1 out of that then, the first section?
Yeah, it'll probably work. See, there's many solutions to problems.
This is awesome. Let me go ahead and run this. Let's go. Okay, actually, I think. Oh, right. Okay, because we get down to 0 and we return 1 and we are multiplying. Right. So then for our base case.
Yeah, everything works out.
That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jim. That's awesome. The phrase I was searching for is premature optimization is the root of all evil. And Jim, I think you kind of just proved the point. Well, I guess either way, but it turned out we don't need that bit of logic there at all. So I was trying to solve for something that we didn't even really need. I'm seeing a little bit in the chat. Oh, Jorge, hello. Awesome. Good to see you.
Hey, I just decided to watch what was happening. So yeah.
Yeah, good to meet you. Did I get your name right?
Yeah, it's Jorge.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, folks, if you haven't met Jorge, he's one of our evening TAs. He's awesome. He volunteered with us for mock interview day. I think you do front-end engineering right now at Airbnb, is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, before that, I was at Microsoft for several years. This is the first time that I'm like helping out with the non-interview portion of Code Platoon. So I figured I'd just stop by for a few minutes in between tasks and check out what you guys are doing. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. You are welcome anytime.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for the explanation. I'm going to throw that in our Slack, and I'll just read it out to you for folks, and also for the sake of the recording. So Jorge was saying in answer to Tesla's question about why is JavaScript so weird about having this export object that essentially when when JavaScript, the language was created, it didn't have modules or anything. There was a giant change in JavaScript called ES6 or ECMAScript 6, where this language spec changed. And there are a couple ways that the community tried to come up with to do that. And Node.js chose to create a special object called module.exports. And is that, yeah, so Hoya, is that module, is there a module object that Node basically creates for us with an exports property, and then you stick everything in there?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm more of a JavaScript in the browser guy, and so I'm less familiar with like the Node side of things. But yeah, it's essentially this like a special object that they use to sort of say, okay, anything inside of like the exports object. So that's why you say exports dot factorials equals. So it takes all of the properties in that object, and that's what it sort of treats as the things that you want to make available outside of that file.
Yep. And we were talking about like this object and this context. We were talking about like when you are defining an object in JavaScript, you can't use this dot some object property inside the object definition. And I was surprised that it worked here. And I realized it probably is because Node is doing something under the hood so that that exports object already exists by the time we get to the line in a code where we're using this context to like access this object property.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly what's causing that. And just for context for folks, this, I don't know if you had a chance to talk about it, but this is the special keyword that in JavaScript has the value that it takes changes depending on like how you call it. It has some like interesting properties that like I won't go into right now, but essentially it's like depending on where it is, it'll like have different values. And in this case, what it might have is like it's because in the browser, if it doesn't have anything else, this will by default take the there's a global object called the window object in the browser, which is kind of like your global, that's where all of the like global level like functions, like you guys were talking about like parse int before. You can see if you type in your console in the browser window.parseInt, it'll like autocomplete and show you parseInt as part of the window object. And so by default, if this doesn't have like a value, it like goes to the global object, which in the browser is the window. In this case, it might be the exports object or something. That's why it like knows to say like this equals export, but don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure how it works in Node.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, I would say generally avoid this unless there's a particular reason to use it. Yeah, awesome. Zainab, how do you feel? Should we stop the recording and start to wrap it up for a day, just to so folks don't stay crazy late for purposes of time, because it's about 5:40, I think.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.